I always forget to do that. I want to make sure that I did not. And I see that we are right past the hour. I want to welcome you all to the Local and Regional Food System Recovery and Resilience Project Fall Webinar Series. My name is Libby Christensen. I am at Colorado State University and have been the project manager on this project for the last 10 months, I think, at this point. And today this second series, kind of in the fall series, we're starting to wrap up the project. We are finishing up December 1st. And so this is our time to start sharing with our community what we've created. And today we'll be hearing from the data and action team, or data and metrics team. But before we get into exactly what their piece of the puzzle is, I wanted to share a brief video with you all, just giving a basic overview of the project and how this fits into the efforts and initiatives that we've been working across the country in our response to the disruptions associated with COVID. So with that, I will share a quick video. Okay.
The COVID-19 pandemic hit all of us by surprise and lasted far longer than anyone could have imagined. Impacts on farms, food producers, market channels, and food systems infrastructure were vast and varied, requiring rapid innovation and adaptation. Faced with sold-out CSA programs and empty grocery store shelves, our food systems leaders responded with creativity, innovation, and the determination to continue feeding our communities. What's more, effects of the pandemic continue to cast a long shadow across our nation's local and regional food systems, from bottlenecks in our public school supply chains to unprecedented wait times at livestock processors. In 2020, in an effort to capture innovations and support adaptation and recovery, the United States Department of Agriculture's Agricultural Marketing Service, along with university and organization-based partners, worked to document local and regional food systems' responses to pandemic disruptions and disseminate innovations to stakeholders across the country. Building on the insights gained and successful impacts of that project, we're now headed into a second round of our Local and Regional Food Systems Recovery and Resilience Initiative. This project focuses on translating lessons learned during the pandemic and simultaneous social crises into an intentional and collaborative strategy for supporting recovery and fostering equitable approaches to resilience. While distinct in their focus, each component of this project is designed to inform and reinforce the others. We have 4 main focus areas. Our network of networks continues cross-agency and sector learning, collaboration, and strategic action by convening organizations leading local and regional food systems networks, university-based researchers, and USDA staff and leadership to share urgent and emergent issues, coordinate strategies and programming, and foster cross-stakeholder communication and collaboration. Building off the lessons of 2020, our Resilience Playbook team is developing a multimedia strategy kit for food systems leaders so that we can stay ready for the next disruption. By identifying the strengths and vulnerabilities of local and regional food systems in times of crises, our playbook will support leaders in developing immediate-term, mid-term, and long-term strategies for fostering equitable and resilient food systems. The Data and Metrics Initiative is focused on fostering greater data efficiency and literacy across local and regional food systems by engaging project stakeholders and completing a gap analysis of existing data, fostering peer mentorship, and providing technical assistance. Finally, our project will continue to produce publications, technical assistance, and outreach tools, including our sector snapshots, innovation briefs, cross-sectoral webinars, and data briefs. We are committed to continuing our shared work of building a robust collaborative that weaves together the different expertise and skills of our network members, the power of transparency and mutual accountability with project outputs, and a shared vision for how we can work together to build resilient, just, sustainable, and vibrant regional food systems.
So I feel that video does a much better job than I could in terms of explaining the complexity of this project. But as was mentioned in the video, we've got the project broken down into 4 separate pieces. And so today we will be hearing from the data and metrics team. And I'm just going to quickly share my PowerPoint. And so as the video mentioned, there's these 4 pieces and they're working in collaboration across the space. And the data and metrics team were really focused on creating a data explorer, a data warehouse, and really a community of users of that information and data. And so today we've got a wonderful panel of Ashley Chaffetz, Ela Rausch, Prem Duraraji, and Tanya Taranovsky. I did not practice that. I apologize. But one of the great things about this project is that we try and pull back the curtain and really engage in a conversation and dialogue around what these individuals and teams are working on. And so while some projects might come out with the final perfectly polished final product, here we're really trying to engage our community in the conversation from the get-go about what's happening on the ground and get feedback and create kind of a conversation and a dialogue. So if this is your first time joining us on the webinar, we have a really active chat box. We invite you to post questions or ideas or suggestions in that space. And we will be aggregating all of that information into a webinar summary at the end that we'll send back out to everyone and is available on our website. We also have recordings of all of our webinars on that website, as well as those written summaries. So if you don't necessarily have time to watch the full thing, you can go ahead and check those out. But so to get us started, I would like to invite each of the panelists to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their organization. And then I'm just going to invite you to answer one question about what do you like most about exploring data? Like, what about data gets you excited? What are you excited about sharing and learning from this process? And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now so we can really have this conversation. So we'll start off with Ashley.
Hi, I'm Ashley Chaffetz. I'm an agricultural marketing specialist in the local and regional foods division of the USDA Agricultural Marketing Service. I think it's really fun to use data. I like being able to answer questions and make policy recommendations with evidence.
Pass it over to Ela.
Hi, my name is Ela Rausch. I'm with Otto Rausch Consulting based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I work as an independent consultant to nonprofits, for-profits, and government organizations across the country. And one thing that I really like about exploring data is looking at the different outcomes across different geographies and where we see similarities and differences. I think it's really interesting to think about what implications those differences have for communities and for the people who live there.
Pass it off to Prem.
My name is Data Elevates. Data Elevates is a social enterprise that builds capacity for mission-driven organizations and vulnerable communities to use data more effectively in their decision-making. We do this through trainings, organizational development, and data science for good projects. And to the question, what I love about exploring data is the opportunity presents. You know, with more and more data being generated every day, there's more potential for improving programs, serving people that need it, doing good. And I love how this exploration is more and more available, which just builds empowerment.
Tanya.
Hi, I'm Tanya Taranovsky. I'm the Director of Programs at Farm to Institution New England, also known for short as FINE. And FINE is a nonprofit organization that works to support a network of farm to institution stakeholders throughout New England and beyond. And we do a lot of work with data, trying to understand what farm to institution looks like in our region. And so as an organization, it's something we care a lot about and we use to help others in our network. And personally, I really appreciate it for its help in decision making. It makes it more robust. And I also, in terms of the exploring side, really appreciate sort of getting a chance to think about what we know and what we don't know, so that we can build better programs to help figure out what we don't know.
Wonderful. Thank you all for those brief introductions. I feel like people do such a better job about introducing themselves rather than leaning in on me. And so we're going to start off with Ashley to give a little bit more background about the project and how this all got started and some of the framework that has helped inform this moving forward. So I will share the screen again with the slides. Hand it off.
Okay, I had to adjust my view. So hi. So as the video showed y'all, the initial project in 2020 was a reaction to the COVID-19 pandemic and the desire to have local and regional food system stakeholders be a part of each other's networks to have access to each other. And as further explained, the second part of this project is focused on recovery and resilience. And to that end, the data and metrics piece is really a microcosm of the larger project, which is we should all have access to data to do our work. And so we're gathering this data that we do have and creating a place to share it. So the data and metrics arm has multiple parts. So first, we'll show and explain all of these things. But first, a warehouse of primary, secondary, and innovative data. Second, a website that houses our data explorer. It's designed to showcase the data in the warehouse, but also assist grant applicants and grantees in reporting. And you'll see and hear more of that later today. And then forthcoming, we also have a data equity framework focused on food systems. And I believe Ela will speak to that a bit. But so I want to touch on the data themselves. Next slide, please, Libby. We reviewed the mission statements of all of the organizations that are part of the cooperative agreement and then grouped them into themes. Local food sales. So this map shows the location of all of those different organizations. So yes, thank you for advancing. So we group them into these themes: local food sales, labor in the food system, community wealth, nutrition security and food access, business development and infrastructure, and policy. And from there, we sought out data focused on those themes. And so for the most part, the data that are in the warehouse are public data sets that we have relocated to the data warehouse. Each theme has a corresponding document. Next slide, please. That details what data are in the warehouse, as well as what data we wish were in the warehouse. So members of the greater local and regional food systems community will soon be able to submit their data to the warehouse as well, which is a GitHub site in progress. The data that Prem will show off are mapped or visualized at the county level and we very much prioritized data quality as we put that data set together. So for some of the data, we just did the legwork to organize disparate data and put it in a tidy spot. So for example, part of our data are focused on nutrition security and food access, like this document is showing. And the USDA Food and Nutrition Service programs, like the National School Lunch Program, are administered by the states. And so therefore each state reports participation rates, number of meals, et cetera, on their own website. But that makes it hard for researchers to find a data set that encompasses all 50 states. So we asked FNS to provide us the data from the FNS 10, which is the form the states submit to them, and now include that data in the data warehouse. It was already public data, but now it's cohesive data. I think that's it. Oh, this is also part of that same document that goes by topic. Each variable that are in the warehouse. So it says the topic, area, what the variable is, where we got it, and how you could find it if you actually wanted to go to the source and get the data from the web. This is basically a visualization of how all of that process worked. I don't have anything else to say about it. Thank you.
So I think now we're going to turn it over to Ela. And so Ela, you mentioned really briefly in your introduction about who and what you are, but I think one thing that has been so valuable to this team is that your experience working with the Federal Reserve, your background in impact measurements and cross-sector collaboration. How have you sought to assure that equity is considered when creating this type of tool in a data explorer, and what role has that really played?
Yeah, so prior to becoming a consultant, I spent a decade leading the Federal Reserve's Healthy Communities initiatives, which were focused on social determinants of health. One of those issues included healthy food access and healthy food financing. And much of my work is really focused on data indicators related to economic and social trends, from community indicators websites to data dashboards to logic models for program evaluation, and really thinking with an eye towards serving those who might not have the capacity to do research and data analysis themselves. With regard to equity, I know I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I actually live in the neighborhood with the police station that burned down. So I was very impacted by the murder of George Floyd in 2020. And I know that at that time, many organizations really sought to increase their diversity, equity, and inclusion and justice commitments. But I think a lot of people weren't really equipped to think critically about what that really entails. A lot of people came out with an equity statement and put it on their website and they moved on. And it's one of the things that I really appreciated about working on this particular project, because I think that this team has been really committed to its equity goals and really thinking critically about what does it mean for a data explorer and a data warehouse to be equitable and to really play the role of promoting and advancing equity. And so I had a couple of slides that I wanted to show and briefly walk through some of the challenges we encountered and how we decided to address them throughout the website. So for the folks on the call, you're probably aware that creators of data warehouses, data explorers, and data dashboards are likely to encounter several challenges when it comes to the issue of racial equity. And I know that Ashley mentioned that these are public data sets, right? And so we're dealing with things that are already constructed and created. And that's what we have to work with. And one of the first things that we come up against is that the data is not disaggregated by race or ethnic group. That's a pretty common barrier. But as we started to unpack all the issues with public data sets, we realized that we had data tables and variables with undesirable labels, such as non-white and other, and our group had a lot of conversation about the impact of those data labels and how that would affect the perception of this website being equitable. We also ran into some problematic program data set names, such as historically underserved. Again, these are embedded in data sets within USDA and other government agencies. And we talked about why that's problematic, knowing that this isn't a historical problem, it's a current problem, and these inequities are still happening today. We talked about why it's a challenge that the data lacks context for why differences among racial groups might exist. I think oftentimes we look at disparities in data between white communities and communities of color without really thinking about why those disparities exist. And oftentimes that that can paint communities in a bad light. And finally, we came across the problem of key data measures that we know are important and we really need them, but they're not currently collected. And so cumulatively, we came to the realization that racial equity is deeply embedded in our data. And we started to think about how we could actively address this rather than just saying, oh, we're not going to include those measures because we don't have them, or that's the way the data set is labeled, we can't do anything about it. I think too often with data indicators projects, that's often the response is that we just, stay committed to what we have and move on without really thinking about how we can try to change the conversation or promote change. And so I wanted to take an opportunity to show you how this data team decided to address some of these challenges within the data warehouse, which powers the Explorer that we will get to see and learn about. And so, the team started out with the premise that the website needed an equity statement, and they very quickly realized that that was not enough. And so, the first challenge that we came up against that I mentioned is that key data measures are needed but not currently collected. And so, within this data warehouse, you saw the 2-page document that Libby showed, is that for each of the topic areas, we are including additional suggested measures. We hope that we will be able to include these when they come online, and we hope that site users will develop them for use with their own projects. The issue of data lacking context for why racial groups have differences and why those exist. We chose to address this in 2 ways. We include a section called Narrative Matters for each of our topics, and we provide a detailed description for why Black, Indigenous, and people of color are affected by systemic barriers. We also have a section on the website called Data and Stories, which is forthcoming, that will include some case examples that show how people have been impacted by issues and what that looks like on the ground. And we're really encouraging site users to use contextual narratives in the data that they pull off the website, and to advocate for removing systemic barriers through policy and programs. Ashley mentioned that we're going to have a data equity framework. We have this challenge with data sources, data tables, and labels with undesirable names. And that was something that, because these are public data sets, it's hard with hundreds and hundreds of indicators to go in and change those all. But we realized that we don't need to be the ones to perpetuate it beyond that point. And so our framework is going to provide guidance to users on how they can think about the issues related to equity with regard to funding, data collection, analysis, interpretation, and communication, and provide guidance on how we can talk about these things differently and not use the labels and names that are embedded in the data. And then finally, I mentioned at the beginning that oftentimes racial equity, I think, it's a checkbox or an afterthought. People feel compelled to do it, but they don't think that much about it. And we really have thought a lot about what it means to promote equity on the website and make it a primary thought and not an afterthought. And so we've got equity in the global header for the site. We're going to have an equity goal statement that is largely aspirational, recognizing that we're not going to solve all the world's problems, and we've also talked a lot about opportunities to make the equity features within the site more interactive, and so that people don't have to go looking for it, but that we encourage people to use the framework, to think about their analysis in a critical way, and to be more mindful. Our hope is that we can actively promote equity through this Data Explorer tool and in the site and warehouse, rather than just saying that it's something that we care about. This team, I know, really felt to wanting to advance equity through this tool.
Thank you so much for that. I think that provides a really important foundation for how this team was thinking about issues of equity and the challenges and the ongoing conversation to both push ourselves as users of the data, but also engaging in a larger conversation with our partners at the federal or local or county level about how they're collecting the information, what type of information they're collecting, and this ongoing dialogue with funders, as well as how do we frame and use data to frame challenges facing our communities across the United States. And so with that, I would like to invite Tanya to speak a little bit with FINE as kind of uniquely positioned in that you both support other organizations that are growing for grant efforts, but also are applying for grants on your own. And just want to hear a story about how you're using data to inform the work that you're doing, both internally as an organization, but with your partners. So with that, I just ask you to tell us a story about how you've used data in the past to pursue those resources to be able to do the good work on the ground that you're doing.
Thanks, Libby. So as I mentioned earlier, and for those of you who came on a little bit late, FINE is an organization that supports a network of different folks working on farm to institution in the Northeast and beyond. And a lot of our work is centered around research, and therefore data and metrics are a really key component of that. We want to understand what the farm to institution landscape looks like. And so we do both original research as well as collect data from other sources to try to pull together that picture. So what does procurement look like? How much are colleges sourcing? How much are schools sourcing? What are their challenges, barriers, that sort of thing. And but I want to sort of kind of connect the dots to this project a little bit and talk about a grant that we recently applied for, which was the Regional Food System Partnership Grant. And this is one of the LAMP grants that USDA offers. And we applied there was a suite of partners, but there were 4 of us that were really working closely in collaboration to develop this grant proposal. And that was FINE, and also the Springfield Food Policy Council from Springfield, Massachusetts, the City of New Haven Food Policy Division, City of New Haven in Connecticut, and the Cumberland County Food Security Council from the Portland, Maine area. And these are folks that we have worked with in the past, and we wanted to work with them this time in this particular proposal to really center racial equity in the way that we were approaching the design of the project, as well as the outcomes of what we were trying to do. And it came about that sort of applies in both what we were trying to do is within the project, but also what we wanted to do was recognize that FINE is an organization that has applied to these grants and has received government funding in the past and is equipped to manage the sort of complexities of those grant proposals. And those of you who have applied, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It takes kind of a little bit of knowledge and some infrastructure to do that. And these were smaller organizations, growing organizations. Even the City of New Haven, their Food Security Council, or the Food Policy Division, excuse me, is pretty new. And so these were organizations that had not necessarily applied for this kind of funding before. And so we wanted to also use this as a way to help them understand that landscape and figure out how to do this and be more independent on it in the future. And so that was part of the design of the project as well. So we came together, and these are folks that we, as I said, we have worked with, but had not really worked together all that much yet, but they were really eager to learn from each other's experience to strengthen food sovereignty in their own communities. So this grant proposal required quite a lot of data. We needed to describe these different communities that we would be working in. How many people? What are the demographics of the people living in the area? What do we know about food sovereignty in these communities, including food access? And this is a big topic, so there's lots of ways to think about that. And people working on it in different ways. So as we were compiling these data, we wanted to be sure that we were using similar sources from similar timeframes, that we were giving relatively current info that was analogous for all 3 communities. But this was actually quite a lot of work, and we reviewed a lot of data sources, and it required a fair bit of coordination across the different partners who, as I said, had not yet really worked together all that much, and they had different levels of experience in finding and using these kinds of data. So this is a great sort of example of where in a grant proposal, that whole process of developing the grant proposal, not just the actual outcome piece, involves a lot of data collection, and it's an important part of developing the relationships.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that experience and thinking through how one can use data, particularly when applying for grants. And so I think as people see that we're trying to do our best to respond to questions in the chat box, feel free to put additional ones in there if you have any questions for Ela, Tanya, or Ashley. But we're going to shift gears a little bit, and I'm going to hand it over to Prem to really let us see the Data Explorer and show what the user experience will look like, what the possibilities of this tool will be, and then we'll kind of use that example from New England to explore what could have been if this tool had been available 6 months ago. But we'll kind of explore it from there. And then we'll open it up for more questions and conversations and talk about what are the next steps, when can you get your hands on this tool, and how do you stay involved. So Prem, I'm going to hand it off to you.
All right, thanks, Liv. So before kind of going into what I call like a tease of the tool or the Explorer, I want to give a quick background here. So Data Elevates, my team was really tasked to develop this Data Explorer, showcase information for food system stakeholders nationwide to essentially help develop better projects, justify work, and improve decision-making in the space. The Explorer is meant to be kind of a living, breathing thing, in that we're developing the structure for it, we being Data Elevates, but the idea is that it will sort of regularly be updated with content, new data on that front. So even when it is done, it's never really done. And then on a personal note, I'm happy to be part of this project in that it's kind of marries my passion for like data-driven decision-making, as well as local food systems development. A few other notes before going into it, where you have public, so it essentially makes the data visualization freely available to use, interact with, so that played heavily into it. The tool itself incorporates something like 280 plus variables in the visualization. So it's certainly very ambitious, but it's also very worthwhile. And then I would also mention that we are essentially at like an MVP, or maybe slightly beyond that phase, minimum viable product, where essentially we're very much at development point. So we're in the middle of this, so which is why this is a tease. So we're working on like things like formatting, the layouts, data cleaning. There's still a few pieces of data that need to still be added into it. So definitely showing you a work in progress here. So let me go for it.
And Prem, we're having a little bit of internet connectivity issues, so it might be worthwhile for you to turn off your video, particularly when you're sharing your screen.
Okay. I hope that is better. Okay, 1 second here. Let's get things going. All right. You can see the visualization. Anyone thumbs up? Okay, good. Just want to make sure before I go into this. All right. Okay. So I wanted to kind of actually, before giving sort of an example of a few examples actually of how this can be used, I wanted to just note the different parts of the visualization. And again, completely a work in progress, as you'll see as you sort of go through it. But there's an interactive map, which is the page that we're on. We'll walk through that in a second. There's also sort of a key metric for grants, which is that third button at the top of the navigation. And then there are also there are topic area pages. We have one for food access. We have one for labor in the food systems. We have one for food business development, and one on community resources. So we'll go through some of these as an example. So as we go through this, we kind of go through a few things here. So first of all, on this page, so I just started off with Alabama, but we're gonna be moving on from this. So if we wanted to see, say, community characteristics in a relation to, if we wanted to go to community characteristics, the first thing we could do, we could follow this. We should be following this step by step sort of section here. So we want to see characteristics. I don't know. I could throw some ideas at percent population with broadband access. So we have data, 2016 data right here. We're gonna throw this in. it's still on Alabama, because of course that's where we had it on. But let's say we wanted to just showcase the New England states. This will take me a second here, but I'm going to just add them in. So you can do this through the drop down, but you can also, as you can tell, sort of do it through like a search at the top. So let me just give me a second to do this. Either way works. Massachusetts. Connecticut. Good. Connecticut. See if I think I should have added them all. All right, so now it should be, yeah. Okay, so essentially right now we are showing, because already all counties, so we're showing all the counties for the New England states. We've added them all in there. For percentage broadband access based off 2016 data. So a few things here. One, we can, in the map itself, you can see there's a gradient, of course, around here, showcasing sort of low percentages of broadband with the lighter color. And then, of course, darker is higher percentages of broadband access. And you can sort of, as you hover over, you can see pieces of information around it, you know, in terms of a little bit more definition, a little bit more of the variable definition, the source, things of that nature. And then a few things you can do with this as well. You can sort of like, and you can see it also connects to the bar chart here below. A lot of information there just because you're looking at all counties in all of these states. So if you want to say just randomly, you wanted, I don't know, say you lived in Cumberland County or working around that region, let's say you just wanted to pick a few of the ones around there, you can, and I'm going to use this functionality here, but you can essentially just select those and then sort of just pick small, right? And I think you selected. A lot of function, the zoom function itself makes it easy to sort of pick what you would want to pick there. And then let's say you were also interested in, I don't think personally, off of that, let's say, you know, interested in looking at school food. So let's just go to institutions. A lot of my food system experiences around farm to school. So I'm going to go for what I feel like is interesting here. So school food dollars spent on local food. Let's try that. It's going to stay with looking at the information available in the same states. When the information isn't available, it'll be like sort of blank, but most of the information is available and it is based off of the USDA Farm to School Census for this example. But let's say we also just wanted to focus on not all the states, not all the New England states, but we wanted to just focus on Connecticut as just an example. So pick Connecticut again, use a drop down to do that. All the information from Connecticut, and then, well, the formatting I think is the comments and things like that, of course, but you can also include data labels, etc. And also, nonetheless, that's why I just wanted to showcase it. We can also just focus on. You can use the map. I'm sorry. You can pick counties through the map itself, but you can also sort of do it through the drop down. So let's just pick a few here. So 6 and okay, and then you'll see that the bar chart changes as well. So a lot of functionality here, formatting and content and pieces that still need to be worked out. It's a work in progress, as mentioned. I do want to just quickly go over show key metrics in relation to plans. So let's take a second. I think the loading time and things like that will be improved as we go further into this. So it contains states and state and county geographic region that you're focused on, as we sort of, they all connect actually in that way. But if you wanted to say change it to Rhode Island as an example, and I'll use the drop down because I haven't really used that much here. You just pick Rhode Island, and then it shouldn't show. So take a second. But it won't show anything because we're still on, counties in Connecticut. So we just change the counties. Let's just show all of them for this example. And then you'll see that those counties specified pop up here as well. And then finally, I just wanted to show one more quick example. So say we wanted to then go to labor. Again, these are sort of what's it called? Key metrics within the food systems sector. So you can sort of see it continues to be, the same counties, Rhode Island, and you can look at sort of location quotient, and you can see the definition here, location quotient of annual average employment relative to the US for Rhode Island. It actually includes the state of Rhode Island as well. Yeah, finally, just so we can see one more thing here. We could change it to Maine, and then let's say we were, lived in Maine and we're working with sort of the local system sector in Maine. Can adjust that, and you will see that it changes as well. And again, I can adjust this down to different counties. So that's kind of like a quick, and I'll just bring it back. That's a quick sort of like tease of what the visual sort of is. As mentioned in the beginning, it's something like 280, I believe, plus indicators, metrics that we're sort of working with. Very ambitious. There's a lot of information within it, and it is completely customizable towards the data that's being presented in regards to the data itself, but then also the geographic regions. And as we go further along, I think it's going to add more and more value. So that is, a walkthrough of the tool.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Prem. And I really appreciate everybody's patience and understanding as we had some technical issues with the audio, and we'll make sure that summary is available. But at this time, I want to see just Tanya's response, seeing this tool in action. How could you imagine using it next time that you're applying for a grant? Would this provide value? And I think also specifically speaking to that capacity piece of not necessarily relying on an organization like necessarily FINE that has the experience and expertise to pull that information, but have this one location that is more available to all.
Yeah, thanks, Libby, and thanks, Prem. Well, thanks, Prem, for all the work in this, but also for those great examples. For those of you that work with these kind of data sets who are involved in grant applications, sets my heart aflutter. I get all excited about it. So building on the example that I was sharing a little bit earlier about our regional food system partnership grant with 3 community level partners, I see Prem showed many ways that this could be useful, and hopefully you all got a little bit of insight into that based on what I've already shared about the grant that we were developing. But for example, had this Data Explorer been in place when we worked on that grant, we could have used that data to help us describe the communities. Of course, the place that we start is with the people who are in those communities, who understand what's going on in that very real world description of what's happening. But the data really helps then support and tell that story as well. And so we could have used this Data Explorer to connect our partners right from the outset, share that kind of information, have them explore, look for the information and see how it matched with what they understood about the places that they're working in, and use that to kind of put us on the same plane, so to speak, in terms of information where we were starting from, and help people understand the 3 different communities, which have helped really build not only the grant requirements, but it would have helped us with a lot of that partnership development in the very beginning, I think. And it's just it's a useful and visual way to strengthen that kind of understanding, which is really helpful. As we know, people learn in different ways. So having the ability to discuss, to see numbers, to play around with things, to tell our stories, all those things combined are really helpful for building partnerships and collaboration. We could also really have used some of that food access data to help us identify the baseline from which we would be starting this project. So really trying to understand the current situation with food sovereignty and how we would be working to change that and improve that. So having that baseline from which to measure changes and impact that we intend from the project would be really helpful. And the Data Explorer could have also helped us with some of our outcome targets. For example, one of the intended outcomes is to increase consumption of and access to local foods through this project. And in order to be able to tell the USDA how many people might benefit from our efforts, which is one of the sort of required data points for that outcome, we went to many different data sources to come up with those numbers. And like I said, we work with that kind of data all the time. So we knew where to look. But even so, it took a lot of time to research and compile all of those data. And the Data Explorer would have made it easier for FIND to provide this, but also it would have made it easier for organizations like our community partners to lead on grant proposals like this one, because they could more easily access the information they need for that proposal. I think that can be really overwhelming if you are starting community level work and you are not clear on how to find the information that's required for these kinds of grant proposals. It can be really daunting, but to have this kind of one-stop shop where you can go, you can easily explore in your community and other communities and sort of see all of that and take the time to work through that, just be incredibly helpful and empowering. So that's one of the things that we're really excited about and that we could see being really useful in this very recent example, but very much going forward as well.
Wonderful, thank you. And I know that there's a tendency of folks to drop off at the hour, and so I want to be respectful and mindful of that. And I think a lot of people have questions about when do they get their hands on this tool. So I wonder if Prem can just provide a little bit of a short kind of what the next steps for Data Elevates are, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ashley to talk a little bit more about what the bigger project kind of next steps are.
Yeah, thanks, Libby. Really quickly, right now we are incorporating some of the feedback we've received initially, and we are still in the process of doing a lot of formatting, adding new content, and improving functionality, improving on the speed of the tool, things of that nature, of the Explorer. Sorry, we expect to have another round of reviews in a few weeks, within September, and by I'm not going to give the time exactly, but within October, our plan is to have this thing available for launch. So.
Yeah, and I think to that end, we're hoping that the webinar participants today will be willing to review our next iteration of this Data Explorer. We don't think it's exactly ready to let loose into the world yet, but we will be previewing it or showcasing it again at the Agricultural Marketing Summit in late October in Pensacola, Florida, and we're hoping that many of the people who join us here will also join us there. But after that, we will release it out into the world, and we'll email everybody on this call to say, hey, it's out there, please use it, please comment on it. And we think that that also gives you, as we expect some folks on this call to apply for the regional food business centers, we expect that that would also give you plenty of time to take advantage of the new Data Explorer and hopefully use it in your applications. Yeah.
So if folks have questions, I encourage you to post them in the chat. I'm sure if you have it, somebody else in the group does as well. Or if you have, one of the kind of game plans is that at the GitHub, there'll be a folder with verified quality data that will be currently in the Data Explorer. But then there's also going to be another folder and resource of either data points that are just available at a smaller local level, either state. We know that some states do a really great job about capturing information about local and regional food systems, while other states just don't have that capacity. So we're trying to create a centralized place to put all of those resources, but recognize that they can't necessarily go into the visualization tool unless they are available across the country. And that once a year, we're going to kind of, CSU is committed to reviewing what information and data is available in the GitHub site and then uploading that into the Data Explorer so that it's available moving forward. So as Prem said, this is very much a work in progress. We're hoping that you all will be our partners in making it better and stronger, but want to open it up if folks have questions. Otherwise, I've got a couple more questions that I can pose to the panel before we wrap up.
I also want to say one more thing.
Please do.
To the, as you saw on the Explorer, there is a section for LAMP. LAMP is an umbrella term that we use for the local agricultural market program, which encompasses 4 grant programs, 3 of which are housed at AMS that we talk about a lot. But I want to encourage y'all to eventually use that to click on LAMP, even if you're not only applying for a LAMP grant or if you're a LAMP grantee, because I think that the data points that are in that section are certainly applicable to other grant programs in the USDA and within your own states and with other NGOs and government agencies.
We'll also be adding point level data to the map as well, but want to acknowledge that, as I noted, that lots of states may be collecting local food data, but it's pretty varied across the country. And so our best source right now is the local food directory with the USDA. And so oftentimes I know that if I'm new to using a tool online and I always go to my home place or the place that I know the best, and I'm like, hey, there's a food hub that I know that should be here that's not included. Why isn't it included? This is not a good because it doesn't include my place. We ask you to maybe step a little aside from that reaction and really encourage you to tell your partners to register at the local food directory, because that is our best source at this time across the country. And that is also an incredible resource for the USDA and for partners across the country. And so I think sometimes we have a tendency to think about our own personal geography without reaching out across the country. And so if you don't see yourself or your best friend or your cousin's CSA, that might be true, but we're only as good as the data that we provide. And so don't go critiquing it unless you're also contributing to it. So that's my little plug, my PSA about data. So we are still very much in the development phase. All of these resources will be available in the near-term future. It's just we wanted to let you all know, but we're not there yet to fully share. I think in the next couple of weeks, I think we're going to be ready to go live with a lot of these resources. But we will continue. If you registered for this event, we will get the resources to you by email. If you can also check in on our project website that will have updates to this particular action team's initiatives and projects and deliverables. And we'll also have a wrap-up webinar in November, kind of going across the entire project about what has come out of this project. But other questions, things that folks want to share? Did I miss anything in the chat?
I'll just say that my 2 favorite things about the tool, I know it's still in development, are one, the fact that you can share the graphs out on social media. I was really excited about that. You'll be able to tweet about them and share them out to your social media audiences. And the other thing is just the fact that I think it's a really huge value add to people who work across sectors. I can already think of the different ways that I'd be recommending this tool to folks that I work with. If I was a community development finance institution, I might use this tool to support a market study for a grocery store. Or if I was a public health researcher, I might be super familiar with the CDC website data, but not familiar with the food system data. And I just think it's such a huge value add to folks who are not, really steeped in the USDA Economic Research Service or the annual survey of manufacturing. It's all right there, and I think it'll be a great resource.
Yeah, building on what Ela said, I think that I've been talking about one particular example, but I think this would be useful in all the different kinds of projects and research, and not just research, but other kinds of projects that FIND works on as well, and that and not just us. One of the things I'm really excited about is that is some of the what will be built into the tool over time. Also, the fact that this is open source is, to me, a really critical piece. There's still just an incredible lack of transparency in the food system that is a huge barrier to making real progress. And having a site where we can collect and share information, the data themselves, but also, as we talked about in the beginning, the context for that, the stories that come out of this, the work that comes out of this is really important. And so one of the things I'm excited about is that this is a place where, as FIND continues to do the work we do, as our partners are doing the work they're doing, that this is a site where people can input into it and where we can continue to share. One of the things from this grant proposal I've been talking about is that FIND tends to work on this regional oversight level of information and data, but working at the community level is giving us a whole new insight into how farm to institution evolves from the ground up. It's a huge learning experience for us. And this tool also gives a great platform to be able to share that kind of information with each other. So we're really looking forward to continuing to work with our partners to populate this over time, and to see what more kinds of information comes out of this and what kind of collaborations it can help build.
I think that's a great place to end, and I'm going to respect everybody's time. Thank you all for joining us for this webinar. I'll be sending out the webinar summary and a link to the recording, as well as hopefully in those next couple of weeks links to the tool. And we really invite and ask for your feedback as potential users of this tool so that we can make it as effective and useful, but recognize that it is still in development phase, and we are honing in to get it to that point where it is on point and useful for folks on the field. So thank you all. Thank you so much for the panelists. Great job. Really appreciate your perspectives and contributions to this conversation as well as this work. You're doing such amazing work on the ground.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for coming and participating.